So, if you've been repeating money affirmations every single morning and are still struggling financially, this video is going to explain exactly why. My name is Catherine Morgan. I am a former financial advisor turned somatic financial coach trainer. And today I'm joined by another EFT master practitioner and hypnotherapist, Teresa Leah Levine. And we're going to be talking about why tapping works when affirmations don't. You know, those affirmations like, I am abundant, money flows to me easily, I am a millionaire. Well, actually, affirmations can be very triggering around trauma. And in today's video, you're going to discover why it is that your brain treats financial success as a threat, how emotional freedom technique, and I'm going to be talking you through the exact demonstration of EFT today, how that actually sends a safety signal directly to your amygdala, and also a very simple practice that you can use the very next time you feel any anxiety around checking your bank accounts. So if you've tried the money mindset work before and there was still something that didn't quite feel right, then keep watching today's video. Welcome to the show today, Teresa. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Catherine. I'm excited to be here and talk to you because, like you said, there's so many synchronicities and commonalities. So I know we're going to have a great conversation.
Yeah, so much so. It was so interesting actually when Teresa applied to come on the show and I was like looking at her story and her bio and we had a conversation and I was like, there was so many similarities in our own personal lives that I'm really excited to dive into what kind of led you into this work, Teresa. So before we dive into the subjects today, what is it that our listeners need to hear about or know about that has led you into this work that you are in today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always personal experience, right? And then having some kind of a realization, and then it's like the mission is clear. So I've always been somebody with a lot of ideas and a lot of drive. I am the embodiment of ADHD entrepreneurial mom. So that is very much my type. And I was always able to start a lot of things from those ideas, create, generate opportunities, but I also noticed a really frustrating pattern of knowing what to do and not having that automatically mean that I could follow through or create sustainable success with all my ideas and all of my knowledge. And
Mm.
I saw this not just in myself, but in so many other high achieving people around me. Intelligent, capable, motivated, but there's this invisible friction. For me, it felt like hitting a wall. That's usually the way that I describe it. And eventually I realized that the issue wasn't strategy and it wasn't knowledge. And thankfully that coincided with the time that I kind of learned about how the nervous system played into things and the subconscious mind. And it was like, oh, here are the keys that I have been missing to get through these doors. Because for me, my past experiences and my own past trauma had built up and had caused a lot of patterns and beliefs and things. And much like you, as far as, since I know we'll talk about money a good bit today, it's what you base a lot of things around. I had a very similar money pattern of, I could generate it, but then I couldn't hold on to it, and it would go out as quickly as it came in. And I also noticed different patterns happening in other important areas of my life, right? You know, health, wealth, relationships, all three of those areas. And I had some car accidents when I was younger that I ended up on disability. And that was during a time when I thought, much like you, that my career was going to be in banking and with money and things like that. I had a job at the bank. It was great. I was going to college. And then all of a sudden, my identity was kind of taken from me. I couldn't work. I couldn't go to school. I had to focus on my physical health, my mental health, and my recovery. And it really affected my feelings of self-worth and a lot of other things that kind of put me in more of a low vibe, low energy sort of state. Around that time, I also, I met my first husband, I got married, had my first son, and ended up, going through a divorce a handful of years later. And just realizing that I didn't have the self-trust, I didn't have the connection with my intuition that I even knew I could have. I mean, it was just so much had kind of gotten worn down from patterns and time and traumas. And after and through the divorce, I really wanted to cultivate more of that and create more calm, clarity, and confidence. It took a while longer still. I mean, it wasn't until after I had married my current husband, Jeff, we'd had 2 more kids, and that's when finally I kind of like reached that tipping point of like, there's got to be something more. Like, I can't be living such a blessed, wonderful life, eh, beautiful home, great husband, wonderful, healthy kids, opportunities for work that I love. At the time, I was doing a lot of work with nutrition and fitness and more of an outer transformation. And at that same time, I was hitting walls with that and realizing the greater transformation was going to have to come from within. So thankfully, that's when I learned about EFT tapping. That's when I started diving more into hypnotherapy and was like, that's where I need to go. That's what really unlocked a lot of things for me and made this fun and made it fun for me to help others do the same thing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
Was there a what was the particular moment for you when you talked about having this great life, you just got remarried and you've got, more children and actually feeling like you were having a joyful life, but there was still something there. What was there a particular moment that you had this realization that you could share with our listeners?
It wasn't one particular moment. It was a lot more cumulative, Catherine. It was the kind of thing where I was noticing more. My awareness was starting to go up slowly, and awareness is always that first
Mm,
great key step to any transformation. So
yeah.
I was the kind of person who was always listening to like podcasts like yours and like I was learning and I was trying to like take these next moves and I was becoming more and more aware that I had what it took knowledge-wise and that I wasn't making it happen. I was
Mm,
recognizing when, my kids wanted to play and I just wasn't present. Or when I was flying off the handle and I was like that yelling mom because I was frustrated and my capacity was just like stretched so thin. And it's those little things that kind of lead us to like, there's something's needs to change here. Like, not everybody seems to be operating in this same way. So there must be some answers that I haven't gotten yet. And realizing that it wasn't a need to learn more, it was a need to embody the change that I wanted and that it was available to me. And then trying things like the first time that I tried EFT tapping, um, it was such a huge shifter for me. And it was like, whoa, like if this is what's possible when I'm tapping generally with a group,
mm,
on things that aren't even super specific to me, then what would happen if I actually got really specific and unblocked all these energetic blockages, these sources of the dis-ease that you're experiencing, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. And what I noticed first was the presence with my kids. And it was like, "Holy cow, like, have I ever been present? Like, have I have I really been, like, that out there and that, like, in my head and sourcing my power either to, like, the future where I can't use it or letting it be drained by things that happened in the past where I also can't
mm.
change anything either?" And learning how to bring that power back to me,
Mm.
whew, like total game changer and so much simpler than I ever imagined possible.
How did you come across EFT in those early days?
So I had known about it for a while. I mean, EFT in the way that we know it and use it is the practice that, Gary Craig created in the 90s. It's been around for a while and it's a combination of ancient Chinese medicine that's been around for thousands of years where we're using the meridian system and the endpoints and modern day psychology. So I remember hearing about it. I don't know if it was on the news or I was watching the Olympics or something back when I was nursing one of my kids on the couch, and I saw like football players doing it. I saw Olympic athletes doing it, and I dismissed it immediately because here I am. I'm just a tired nursing mom of, I don't know, 2 or 3 kids at that point. I don't remember which one it was. And I'm like, all I'd really like is to have a little bit more energy, maybe lose a few pounds and feel a little bit more sane. And like, how does this thing apply to me? It didn't feel like it did. So it was made very tangible to me when it was presented in other ways. And that really blew open the doors of like, oh, like this isn't just for elite athletes. This is for everybody. It's accessible to everybody. And you
Yeah.
can literally use it effectively on anything. And
And so talk us through what happened from that moment. So you're sitting on your couch, you're nursing one of your children, and you're watching some sports professionals use EFT. What did you do next?
so that moment, nothing sunk in. I just remember that moment. It wasn't until actually it was before COVID. So it hasn't been terribly long when I actually had an experience with it on a retreat with other like my health, nutrition, and fitness co not coworker people that were also in the profession. Sorry, mind fart. But I was there and we were doing they brought in an EFT practitioner to work with us on like just like things that most people experience, a little bit of anxiety, some just feelings that would be nice if we could manage them a little bit differently.
Hmm.
Not really cool, the crappy thing that was happening at that time was I was actually getting COVID. I didn't know it, but I had woken up that morning feeling awful. I was already at this retreat. I'm like, I'm going to make the most of it. I felt so sick. And I'm like, I'm going to go. I go to this thing. We're tapping on anxiety. And I'm noticing that my sinuses feel clearer and that like I actually have a bit more energy and I don't feel quite like I'm like dying like I did before the session. And that demonstrated, and I didn't realize it in the moment, but that was demonstrating to me a really cool thing called borrowed benefits that happens with
Mm.
EFT tapping, where while we were working very generally on anxiety, my health symptoms were improving. So, and it's amazing the kinds of things that you can work on with EFT. And again, I hadn't learned it yet. I hadn't become a master practitioner. This was like just dipping my toes in, but coming to find out later as I learned that like we can affect the way our genes express themselves and so much more. It was so cool because we had that EFT session and then we had a photo shoot after that we were all doing together. And I had great energy like for hours. It wasn't until like later that day that kind of the symptoms got worse again and it got bad, but it gave me some genuine relief from my physical health symptoms and also like helped me with the anxiety. I came home from that trip and I pretty much pivoted right then and there. And I remember talking so excitedly to my husband on the couch. And I was like, this is the thing. I need to go get certified. Like, I didn't just enroll in like level 1. I was like, just take me through to master practitioner. Like, he's like handing over the debit card. Like, just go for it, babe. I know, like you're on a mission. Like, there's no stopping you. And I'm happy to support it. And thank goodness I do have a very, very supportive spouse. And he's been very supportive all along, even though this is not really his thing at all. But that was the moment when things really shifted, was when I came home from there and I could see like the spectrum of things that this could be applied to, the ways that it could help at the time, my nutrition and fitness clients that were having trouble like sticking to a nutrition plan or showing up for their workouts or whatever else. I was like, oh, there's so many possibilities here.
Yeah. And who did you go on to study with?
I've studied with a lot of people. I initially studied with Deborah Lindsay. She has a great online EFT certification program and learned a lot from her.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful EFT practitioners, I find. I studied with Cole Dawson, which I know we've spoken about, and I learned EFT with matrix reimprinting, which is
Yeah.
combining the subconscious work as well. And it was similarly to you, actually. I found that I wasn't using it initially with money, but I found that it was helping to support me as a neurodivergent entrepreneur and mother myself in so many ways. And it just, you can't, you can't not be curious about EFT. I think when you've experienced it, you cannot
Yes.
try and avoid it. It's like you have to just go deeper and deeper and deeper. Um, for anyone who has never tried tapping before, or who's maybe seen it and thought that looks a bit strange, can you just explain a little bit about how, like what EFT actually is and why tapping on these specific meridian points has such a powerful effect on our nervous systems?
Yes, absolutely. And it's so important because while I embrace the woo and I love like just how magical this practice is, it's completely backed by science. And that I think makes it even cooler because then you realize like you really don't even need to believe it works for it to work. And that's the best
Okay,
thing
yeah.
for skeptics, right? Because it does look a
Mm.
little weird. Um, People see somebody tapping on their face, their collarbone, wherever, and they're like, what's happening here? But I think when you understand what's actually happening in the body, it makes a lot of sense. So for anybody that doesn't know, EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. So like some of those techniques are like what you're talking about with matrix reimprinting. There's all different techniques that make up the world of EFT tapping. And it combines gentle stimulation of acupuncture or meridian points on the body with psychological processing of emotional beliefs. That's the modern day psychology element of it. So if somebody's thinking about a stressful memory or a belief or some kind of thing that triggers them, then they're going to be tapping on these points, and these points are connected to the nervous system. So what we do when we start tapping is we're sending a signal right to the amygdala. So fight or flight gets calmed down very quickly, and so do your stress hormones. And cortisol can go down in studies up to 43% in a session of EFT. That's huge, especially when we're talking about us as like perimenopausal or menopausal, midlife women, and stress hormones and too much, cortisol create a whole ripple of other things that, stubborn weight gain and feeling lethargic and just not having the capacity for life that we want. So it's much like the ripple effect I explained with my COVID symptoms is that, you might be working on childhood trauma or money blocks or whatever else using EFT, but bringing down your stress hormones is going to have a positive effect on every area of your life, your health, your relationships, all of that. So we get to send this signal to the brain and neutralize things, recognize in a new perspective and with new logic and rationality that some of these memories or beliefs just, they're not dangerous anymore. It allows that energetic and emotional charge to be released. And for entrepreneurs, especially when we have such rampant beliefs that hinder us around like visibility, fear of failure, fear of success, money beliefs, all of these subconscious patterns, they live in the nervous system. And EFT gives us a way to process those patterns quickly, like super fast, safely, without re-traumatizing and, not having to like relive the experience over and over again.
And can we just maybe, for the purpose of those of our listeners who are watching on Spotify video or on the YouTube channel, can we do a little demo of the various tapping points just to show people how they can get started with EFT?
Sure. So there's about 9 points that Gary Craig was able to determine really give us an overhaul of our energy system, which is cool because we have thousands of meridian endpoints. If you've ever looked at like an acupuncture chart or whatever, and you just basically see dots all over the body, they're all over the place. But we've learned that these 9 being the side of the hand, which is the karate chop point, or kind of the sore spot on your chest. I think you did a chest workout the other day and it's sore. That's the spot. Like I think you kind of rub. Those are places where we normally start a round of EFT using a phrase like even though I. So, it could be even though I experience whatever this thing is, or I have this belief about whatever, I love, accept, and forgive myself, or some version of that. There's so many nuances here, Catherine, where it's like some people aren't even comfortable saying they love, accept, and forgive themselves. And
Yeah,
we have to nuance things, but this is kind of the just
yeah.
very general overview. So side of the hand, we start there. And then, and depending on who you've learned from or what you might start on the eyebrow or you might start on the top of the head. I'm a top of the head girl. So I go to the top of the head and I tap there while I talk about whatever the issue is. And then we go to the eyebrow point, which is basically like where the hot hair on your eyebrow closest to your nose begins. And then we go to the side of the eye. And for anybody who can't see the video, basically I'm just going around that bone, that kind of that the orbital eye area. So the side of the eye, the temple. And then we're tapping, and it's gently. You don't have to like tap so hard you give yourself a bruise, but I have done that too. Under
Do
the
you
eye a little bit.
do you tend to tap both sides, or are you more of a one side gal?
Great question. When we have 2 of them, like under the eye, side of the eye, the eyebrow, you totally can. as the practitioner that's normally leading things, I'm normally finding myself kind of directing with one hand and tapping with the other. But when I do my own tapping, I do love to use both sides. It feels like it goes
Yeah.
involved me a little bit more.
Yeah.
Side of the eye to under the eye, and then under the nose. So right between the nose and the upper lip, and then under the mouth. So kind of if you have that little line kind of in a chin that you might have right under your lower lip, right there. And then we go to the collarbone point, which is also that same sore spot. It's not actually on your collarbone that you're tapping. It's a little bit below it. And then we go to under the arm, which, women, if we're wearing bras, that's where the bra strap goes around the body that we're targeting. So poor us. Um, and those are the main points, and you cycle through those, and then the process of what you're talking about and how you're talking about it is also pretty nuanced. I'm a big believer that we need to dump out all the negative stuff as harshly as we feel it, without
Mm.
trying to sugarcoat it. When we have feelings about things, even if we know that they don't feel good and they're not necessarily helpful, they still need to be expressed. Suppressed feelings create dis-ease later. So the more we can move those feelings up and out, which EFT is really good at, the better we can do. So depending on how intense what you're working on is, you might stay negative for the entire round. Or if it's something where you feel like you can move more into an openness or a new perspective, by the end of it, you might be opening up to a new possibility, maybe letting 5% of it go, whatever feels aligned. And that's where, looking at other people and how they do EFT, working with a practitioner, that kind of thing can be really helpful to study a bit, because I think one of the biggest questions I get from people is, how do I know what to say when I'm doing EFT tapping? And I think one of the easiest answers, if you want to start and you don't know where or how, and you're not ready to take a full course or whatever, is that you can literally just think about the issue while you're tapping
Mm.
without saying a word, and you can still get a lot of shift in the energy and the way that you feel about it. So I don't overcomplicate it is my most important advice, I think, when it comes to trying EFT tapping, because you can get super complicated. My clients are always like, how do you come up with these like really cool scripts on the spot and just like whatever? And I can't do that. And I'm like, you don't have to. It doesn't, you can still create transformation for yourself without all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are some EFT scripts that you can find online, and there's, plenty of group demos and things on YouTube channels. One of the
Mhm.
things I always find that when you start EFT is it's great to use those just to get familiar with the various tapping points and to get used to the practice itself. One of the things I find is that a lot of videos around EFT can often bypass the negative set very quickly. So people will
Mhm.
tap on, even though I have this belief that I don't deserve to make more money in my business. And then they'll literally and I tap on the top of the finger points. That's
Yes,
how
the
I was
finger
taught
points are
in
great too. Yeah.
EFT before going to the head. And then I often see in videos where people will then go straight into but I am deserving of more wealth. And they'll go into money affirmations very, very quickly. And the reason I wanted to mention that is I know you and I have spoken offline as well about some of the negative consequences actually of using affirmations, and especially using affirmations that we're maybe borrowing off the internet that may actually not belong to our core belief set. I would love just to hear your opinion, Teresa, on why you think that affirmations can be quite trauma inflicting actually for those people who are maybe not conscious of what it can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I noticed the same thing and you can do an entirely positive round of EFT. There's no rules against what you use it for. But when you do that and you haven't resolved the root issue,
Yeah.
it's not going to last. I find that you've really got to root out the negative stuff in order. It's like a garden, right? You pull out the weeds and then you can plant the beautiful plants, and they have the right environment and soil to thrive in without the weeds taking back over again. So
Mm.
a lot of EFT videos skip right to those positive statements, the affirmations. They bypass what's actually present by doing that, right? So the whole reason that EFT works so well is because we acknowledge what the nervous system is already experiencing before we try to shift it. I think that's the real magic. And when affirmations are introduced too quickly or too extremely, then the subconscious can actually interpret them as a threat.
Mm,
So because the nervous system has a belief, like let's go back to money, since I know that's our favorite topic, right? If we have this belief that money isn't safe, or that success is going to overwhelm you, and then you suddenly repeat something like money flows to me easily and effortlessly. Or my favorite one that's super triggering that people love to do is like, I'm a millionaire when they're far from it. Right. And it's like all the subconscious tells you back is like, no, you're not. Like, have you seen your bank account balance? Like, do you know you? There's this mismatch, right? So it creates stress instead of
mm,
creating relief. The
mm.
brain is always looking for congruence. So when we have an affirmation and it contradicts a belief that we hold that's really deeply wired in, then the brain's not going to absorb the positive EFT tapping or the affirmation that you are trying to repeat. It's actually going to strengthen the original belief. Brain is stubborn.
Yeah, and it
So
will go and try and find as much evidence to support the original belief, right?
exactly. So it's almost like it's saying, that's not true. Here's all the evidence why. And that's the reticular activating system in the brain. And so what I have found really helpful is using that in our favor instead of using it against us. So affirmations can be very triggering. And then the RAS, the reticular activating system, goes and looks for all the reasons why that's not true. But what if you asked it a question? Like, what would it take for me to be a millionaire? Or why is it that money flows to me easily and effortlessly? All of a sudden, the guard goes down in the brain. And the cool thing about the RAS, like you've probably heard stories where people, think about like a red car or whatever, and then you see every red car out there, right? The RAS will find it for you. The cool thing with asking these subconscious questions instead of the triggering affirmations is that that part of the brain will go, even while you're sleeping, it will be
Mm.
looking for answers to that and helping to bring them to you. So it's just 100 times more effective than trying to trigger yourself into believing something that you just simply don't, that's not congruent. Um, and yeah, that's huge. So if you repeat those affirmations that aren't aligned, you're going to find more resistance. You're going to find more somatic feeling, maybe tightness in your chest or things like that. And it can happen in areas other than money too, relationship affirmations or affirmations around your health. So with EFT, especially, we want to start by acknowledging what's true and what's present instead of hopping to the outcome that we would like. It's the same
Um,
reason why when we're doing, the kind of work that I do, we're always looking at like the emotions that we need to work on first. Then we're looking at the beliefs. Then we can allow in that new day, that new outcome, a new reality, because we have to look at the emotions and the beliefs in order to be able to truly shift the identity, which also means creating a whole new personality. And that triggers people a lot of times because people somehow think
yeah.
they can keep the same personality while becoming the person that can do what they say they want to do, and you just can't. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. And then we can create the new reality.
And so, how does someone go to that new reality? So, they've maybe listened to this and they've maybe done a little bit of tapping on clearing some of the limiting beliefs. How would you suggest somebody moves from clearing the limiting beliefs into that new reality?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a good amount of work that you can do on your own. But I find that a lot of times people step into the pattern I was talking about earlier, where it's like they're just trying to learn about how to do it. And then they're not actually noticing the change. And I also really believe that for most of the areas where we have wounds or where we have like healing work to do in order to embody a new identity, those things happened in relationship,
Mhm.
right? They didn't typically happen on our own without relationship to something else. So I do find that those things heal best through relationship. So finding a mentor or somebody that you can work with can make this work a lot easier. It's also really hard to see these deeply ingrained patterns on our own.
Yeah.
So you can come a long way in your own awareness, and you can definitely, all hypnosis is self hypnosis. Hypnosis is one of my favorite things, but being guided through it is definitely a different and sometimes a lot more powerful experience. So, we're looking for ways that you can first raise your awareness, much like I was talking about, back in the day, where that was kind of what tipped me into the next level of things. And then ways that you can regulate, or I prefer actually like nourish your nervous system to get that more back online for you. And then it's rewiring those subconscious beliefs. I really do love hypnotherapy for that, because we can't solve these issues through conscious beta brainwave states. They weren't wired in that way. They were sneaking under the radar before we were old enough to question them. And we got to go back deep down in there in order to rewire them too. And yeah, it's creating a new identity is interesting. So we're moving from the awareness to the regulation and not forcing the change, but really like helping the body release the emotional charge that's attached to the old memories, to those old beliefs. And then we're moving into that rewiring where, we're actually installing new associations and new expectations at the level where identity actually lives. And then the final step there is embodiment. So the person starts thinking and acting and making decisions from the perspective of the new identity. And what's fascinating is that reality begins to change because their behavior changes and their energy changes and the opportunities they respond to change. So it's like you don't become successful and then feel confident. I'm sure you've heard that before. You regulate and nourish your nervous system enough that confidence becomes natural, and then the success follows it.
I love that. And I love the whole, like, I can see this flow in my mind very clearly of how you combine that EFT work then with the hypnotherapy to get really into the subconscious, the unconscious, and then moving it into the new identity from there.
Mhm.
If anyone's never, maybe they've heard of hypnotherapy, but they don't know very much about it, what would that typically look like if you were working with somebody and bringing in that hypnotherapy element around money beliefs?
Yeah, I love hypnotherapy. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. So I love getting to talk about it because too many of us have seen it in movies, or we see the Vegas shows where
Yeah.
people are like clucking like chickens and things like that. We're like, is that healing? Is that really gonna like help me with my money blocks or help me with my relationships or my health? So it's like, let's demystify it a little bit. Um, it's not mind control. That's the other thing that I think people think a lot of the times.
Mm.
Hypnosis is a very natural state. You go through it at least twice a day if you sleep, which most of us as humans do. You pass through it going to sleep, you pass through it again coming out of sleep. And you may also notice, I do, when I go to drive someplace that I'm used to going, like the grocery store or my kids' schools or whatever, sometimes you get there and you've parked your car and you don't remember getting there, like how you went, like, was there a red light or was it a green? I don't know. Um, Self-hypnosis. And like I said, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So even when I'm directing a session and I'm guiding somebody, they're always in control. And your conscious mind starts to kind of soften, and the subconscious, which I like to think of as the biggest Google Drive ever that has stored anything and everything that you've ever experienced, and then some stuff from way back before you existed in this physical body too. Like it's got all the data. It becomes more receptive. And then in that state, the brain moves into slower brainwave patterns, alpha, theta, and that's deep relaxation, the kind of stuff that you'd also experience if you were meditating. And even, like I said, like with early sleep stages. And those states are where learning and memory reconsolidation happen easily. So instead of trying to force those new beliefs through the conscious mind, trying to force ourselves, I now believe this, even though I believe this, whatever, for the rest of my whole life, now I'm going to believe this new thing. We're going to work directly with the part of the brain where identity and habits and emotional associations live. So I combine hypnotherapy and EFT very intentionally because I know that EFT helps to nourish the nervous system. We can tap through fear, shame, resistance. We can calm that amygdala. We can reduce that emotional charge and get the body feeling safer and more open. And then we can use hypnosis. And in that state, we can regress. We can revisit some scenes, events, places, times, whatever that like not stuff that you're thinking about with your conscious mind usually. Usually the stuff that pops up in hypnotherapy, like clients always will say to me, even while they're in hypnosis and we're talking, they'll be like, I don't know if this is really what I'm supposed to be gathering right now, but this is what's
Mhm.
here. I'm like, it is. Like just trust the process. It might seem like a very insignificant scene, but like just follow along with me. We'll get there. And we always do. Like there's always a way to connect the dots and figure out how and why this has formed a belief that we then will also reframe in that hypnotic state and create the transformation for.
Yeah.
And yeah, and instead of it's never like you're reliving it, so it's not traumatizing either, much like EFT. I love non-traumatizing techniques. And we can introduce new associations, new perspectives, new beliefs, new emotional responses. And then we can move into the identity part of it, right? I love that I get to create these beautiful tracks for my clients after we do a hypnotherapy session where we pull out all the parts that their subconscious really needs to hear on repeat, the positive stuff. And we set that to binaural beats and they get this amazing track that they listen to, usually for 3 weeks prescriptively. But then I know my clients listen to them long after that because they just love it. They feel good when they listen to it. They find themselves embodying a different way of being when they come out of it, and it's tremendously relaxing.
And I know we talked about this just before we started recording today, and I know that we're going to pop a link in the notes actually for any of you who are listening or watching to this interview on a very specific 7-minute practice that you've put together to help people to actually create this for themselves. Could you just tell us a little bit about that process and why binaural beats as well for anyone who hasn't heard of that before?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, This practice is not actually hypnotherapy. So I just want to make that clear because we were just talking about hypnotherapy. I call it my finish what you start practice. It's a practice I've been using for at least the last 8 years that has really transformed things for me. It's a short somatic subconscious work practice that is definitely more effective than trying to rely on willpower or motivation. And those subconscious questions that we were talking about a little bit more earlier and the affirmations that are non-triggering really get combined. I have a whole process that I take people through in this program where you learn why it's important. You get very connected to your own reasons why your own goals are important, the things where you've maybe been procrastinating or self-sabotaging, whether they're big or they're small. Like this is a practice where you could apply it to a singular to-do list item that you are procrastinating on, or you could apply it to your life dreams and goals. And it's easy to rewrite. I do mine quarterly. And because I find that once I've listened to it for about 3 months, there's so many things that have already happened that it's old and it's boring. And
Mm,
that's awesome. Like,
yeah.
I love it when I get to the point of listening to my 7-minute practice every day and I'm like, I'm not getting anything out of this anymore. And it's like, yes. And that is when you update it and you go to that next level. So it's been a practice that's been key for my clients. And I finally was able to package it up into a very affordable program late last year. And I've just been so excited to be able to share it with more people because it truly is life changing in a very uh, it brings things right into physical reality. And that's where we want them, right? We want to figure out why we're not following through on these things and then make it really easy to create the follow through. And that's what it does.
Yeah, great. I
Oh, and then
love.
you asked about binaural beats too. So I'll touch on that too. So binaural beats are really cool because they allow us to like put headphones on, right? And then we get a different tone in each ear. And sometimes it's very subtle and it kind of creates a harmony between the left and the right side. And it allows the things that normally happen in hypnosis to happen as we're listening to almost anything that's set to it. And um, it's it creates those brainwave states, and it also helps us to like have different and mental and emotional conditions be addressed as we're listening to it. So when we're shifting into those different brain states, we become more receptive. So that's why I use it with my hypnosis tracks. And that's also why when we set something that's not even hypnosis, like my finish what you start practice to binaural beats, then you're so much more receptive to what you're hearing. And it's also your own voice that you're hearing in this practice too. Like I teach you how to create all of that
Yeah.
because hearing your own voice like basically bring your dreams and goals into reality is just super powerful. And then set it to the binaural beats, and it just intensifies the power of it all.
Yeah, my youngest son actually listens to binaural beats in class at school.
Oh,
So
love that.
yeah, and I'm quite surprised actually that they've allowed him to actually have access to wearing his headphones. So when they're going into like,
Listens to it, not the whole class.
oh yeah, no, just I think there's a couple of people actually that use this in his class. But what I love about it is that when he's having to go into like focus mode for a child at his age, and he's 12 now, sometimes the little noises in the background and things can be really distracting for the brain. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, he has like specific Spotify albums. If you just go onto your
Mhm.
music platforms and just put in the word binaural, you'll
Yeah.
find a whole bunch of albums that specialize in specific frequencies around
Yes.
binaural beats. And yeah, it's a really, really beautiful way, even if you're not necessarily just using this around the topic of money, binaural beats to send yourself, off to sleep at night and things are very, very helpful. So I love that you're
Absolutely.
providing
I've
that.
enjoyed listening to them when I sleep for a long time. I haven't done it in a while, but there were times when maybe anxiety was a little higher or I was having disrupted sleep before I had kind of figured out things with perimenopausal symptoms, when that
I'm
was
sure.
super helpful for me. I love that your son gets to use that. And I know that, for a lot of like ADHD brains, it's incredibly helpful because we're so
Mm,
sensitive to stimulation and we're so sensitive to distraction. So just like your son, I have playlists on my Apple Music where I pull them up for focus or relaxation or whatever else. And it definitely gets me into it a lot easier than if I was trying to will myself into it.
yeah, I love that. I love how we've just navigated through this whole episode today about the power of so many different types of somatic practices around EFT, hypnotherapy, binaural beats, talking about the power of hearing your own voice in comparison to just using standard affirmations. If there was one other either technique or something that you wanted to leave our listeners with today, Teresa, that I've not had the opportunity to ask you about today, what would that be for you?
The technique that I think precedes all of these things that is the most important is something that we are all doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that is breath. And I think that most of us are doing it wrong, and even though it's something that we do around the clock. And just the ability to step into greater awareness through taking a lovely deep breath in through your nose, right when you're feeling something hit you that you know is producing a little bit of a trigger or an emotional response, is that's always been what's preceded any greater awareness for me.
Mm,
So, as simple as that sounds, it's it's massively important. And even before I start EFT tapping when something's bothering me, or when I think, oh, okay, I could go, lay down and do a little hypnosis or whatever, the breath is always what precedes the next aligned action. So just don't forget to use your breath to your advantage and allow it to bring your nervous system down a notch and get you into more present awareness and more conscious awareness.
and when you say that we're breathing wrong, what is it that we're doing wrong when it comes to breath?
Well, a lot of us are breathing very shallow. And you may notice this too as you use breath for awareness, that maybe when you open the app for your checking account or you start, trying to work on things with finances, you start breathing more shallow. Or when you're thinking about like selling or other things, your breath changes. And quite simply, I mean, it's not even that we're trying to do it wrong. Things like the screens that we're on, computers, phones, all of these things impact our breath and impact our
Mm,
nervous system. So we have to be very conscious about getting back into it. And then, Lord forbid that you're also like you are a mouth breather when you sleep or whatever else. That's going to impact your energy. It's going to impact your oral health. It's going to impact your gut microbiome, like all sorts of things. So just getting in touch more with your breath is something that I think it precedes all of these other amazing changes that we're talking about.
yeah, and such a lovely segue because I know that in the most recent episodes, we've been talking about different somatic practices, and breathwork is one of the practices that I know has been phenomenal for a lot of people. So we'll be diving into more breath work in some of the other episodes. So thank you for just planting that little seed there for our listeners as well. Teresa, if anyone would love to connect with you, I know we've mentioned we'll pop a link in the notes for some of the resources that we've been talking about today. But if someone wants to connect with you personally, where would be the best place for them to come and hang out with you?
Yeah, the easiest place to find all of my resources is my website, which is teresalearlevine.com. It's Teresa with an H. You'll be able to find that Finish What You Start practice there, my EFT practices there. You can join my free community on School, which is full of all sorts of resources that you can dive into. You can purchase my book. You can listen to the podcast. Everything is linked there. It's a super ADHD friendly website. It's literally just links to all my stuff. So it makes it the easiest to find and to not get distracted going down a rabbit hole you don't want to go down.
Super. Thank you so much. I'll pop a link to everything there that we've spoken about today in the notes.
Thanks, Catherine.
Teresa, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your expertise today. I've really enjoyed speaking with a fellow EFT practitioner and have just loved hearing about how EFT and some of the other somatic practices have really supported you in your life and in your work. So thank
Oh,
you
me
so much
too.
for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for listening, guys. I hope you are enjoying this somatic series that we have been sharing with you on the channel, whether you're listening on the podcast or the YouTube channel. I would love to hear any ahas, insights, or perhaps just one piece of wisdom that you have taken away from this today. Pop it in the notes on whichever platform you're listening on. I always take the time to reply to all of your comments. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on again on the show next Monday. Take care, guys.